We are now live on YouTube.
Just testing my audio.
Chris Hart testing on the audio. 5 by 5, thank you. Is everybody ready? This is the 2-minute warning. Is everybody ready? Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Ms. Fultz, do we have a quorum for the meeting today?
We do, and because we are meeting remotely, I will call the roll to make sure that we have a quorum and that the minutes accurately reflect today's participants. And also that we account for all alternates in the event any commissioner has connectivity issues or is not in attendance. I do want to point out that under Section 8 of the WMSC Compact, an alternate will participate in the public meeting to reach a quorum if needed, and if one or both members from that jurisdiction are absent. So when I call your name, please answer with present. Chairman Hart.
Present.
Commissioner Bob. Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Present.
Commissioner Hull and Commissioner Rush, I know, had indicated they would not be attending. And they are not answering. Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Present.
And alternate Commissioner Lobby.
Present.
And I will note that Commissioner Lobby will be seating and acting on behalf of Virginia because the two members from Virginia are absent today. So we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. We will start today with our safety message from Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Here are a few safety reminders related to riding Metro Rail. Try to use 3 points of contact as you ascend or descend escalators and stairs. Hold the handrail and move in a controlled way. Stay away from the platform edge unless boarding a train that has come to a stop. Do not stick your head out beyond the platform edge when a train is coming or to look for a train that might be coming. Stepping back will reduce your risk of falling or being struck by a train. On the train, sit down or hold the hand railing when the train is moving or about to move. And never enter the roadway or the tracks as a rider. If you drop something onto the tracks, for an example, earbuds or a cell phone, tell the station manager or another Metro Rail employee so that the items can be safely retrieved. The WMSC wants you to have a safe holiday weekend. So stay healthy, stay informed, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our previous meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar-Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes were posted for your review. Are there May 18th, 2021? Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of May 18th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Al has seconded the motion. I will ask our General Counsel, Allison Foltz, to conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approved.
And Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. The minutes are approved.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings. We will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have anyone who wants to give any public comments. Ms. Hogan, do we have anyone who's indicated they would like to speak?
No, Chair Hart, I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. My remarks are brief. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, consideration of final safety event investigation reports, an update on some corrective action plans and audits, and a resolution to authorize the solicitation of graphic design quotations. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I am getting an indication that Commissioner Rush is attempting to join us by telephone. So if we have that indication, perhaps we can either let him in or acknowledge him.
He's already on.
Very good. So I have several items to report to the commissioners. First, twice this month, the WMSC has informed WMATA of safety events occurring in the Metro Rail system that WMATA as an organization was not aware of. After the WMSC informed WMATA of the need to properly identify, report, and investigate these events, Metro Rail belatedly sent notifications to the WMSC as required. This is another demonstration of the importance of our independent safety oversight and the significant access to the Metro Rail data, information, and systems that comes with it. Because each safety event that is properly investigated provides a path to reducing the risk of another similar event happening in the future. In the first event on June 11th, the WMSC's regular monitoring identified that a Metro Rail customer had posted an image on Twitter from a train with doors open on the wrong side at Rhode Island Avenue Station. Although this information was public and other aspects of a door issue related to a possible emergency release handle activation were reported over Metro's radio, Metro Rail did not identify this as a safety event. The WMSC, however, acted quickly to gather additional information, including witness statements, and ensured that as much data as possible was collected for review. After the WMSC notified Metro Rail's safety department of these details, they worked with us on that data collection and analysis. Preliminarily, it appears that the train showed an external emergency door handle fault beginning at Fort Totten Station that did not impede train movement. When the train was at Rhode Island Avenue Station, the train operator walked back through the train in an attempt to address door opening issues, possibly related to the external emergency door handle fault. The operator used a panel known as the Hostler panel on the rear of a car to open the doors rather than the nearest cab. Because the panel faced the opposite direction that the train had been traveling, opening the doors using the left side button actually opened the doors on the right side, which was the side away from the platform. The train operator did not report the wrong side door opening. We expect more details and any updates or corrections to that preliminary information based on the remainder of the investigation. The second recent event that the WMSC notified WMATA of involves improper roadway worker protection on the Red Line between Grosvenor Strathmore and Metro Center stations on June 23rd. A train operator suddenly came upon a work crew that appears to have exited a drainage pumping station room without proper protections in place. The train operator reported these personnel on the roadway to the Rock over the radio. However, Metro Rail did not take any action and did not report this significant safety event to the WMSC. The WMSC identified this event, reviewed additional radio traffic and other information, and required Metro Rail to properly report and investigate this event. Metro Rail submitted the initial formal notification to the WMSC approximately 10 hours after the safety event occurred. Preliminarily, it appears that a work crew was dropped off by a Red Line train, entered a room for work, but then exited the room without protection to get improved radio coverage. The next Red Line train passing through the area after they were dropped off came within about 100 feet of where the crew had been on the catwalk as the train approached. By the time the train stopped, after the operator applied emergency braking, the crew had fled back into the room. Foul time protection is required in this area based on it being in a tunnel portal. We expect more details and any adjustments to this preliminary information based on the remainder of the investigation. In relation to a number of investigations that have come before you or that remain to be adopted today, I want to provide an update on some of WMATA's corrective actions in relation to red signal overruns and improper roadway protection events. Last week, WMATA issued a safety alert related to the role and responsibilities of roadway workers in charge, or RWICs. This is the person who ensures that all necessary protection is in place for anyone on the right-of-way within their working limits. Metro Rail is also increasing internal oversight of roadway work zones. Metro Rail is developing plans to provide additional instructions on the proper use of the General Orders and Track Right System, or GOTRS. GOTRS is the system used to request track time and schedule work zones on the right-of-way. Further, Metrorail is continuing its longer-term plans over the course of this year to advise roadway worker protection rules and training. Among these changes, the Safety Department is committed to sharing details of safety event investigations with the Training Department when investigators identify training as a factor. The Safety Department has also committed to sharing this type of information with other departments to better develop corrective actions. In relation to red signal overruns, after a spike at the end of last year, there's been a significant drop-off during the start of this year, following a safety stand-down. The one overrun that has occurred since the stand-down was linked to poor radio communication in a rail yard, which the WMSC issued a finding on this spring. Metrorail has also increased check rides, conducted research and assessments, and restored refresher training for new train operators. Metrorail is developing a point and call process to have train operators point and call out speed commands and signals, which is a process that has been successful on other properties. Metrorail is also reviewing changes to training related to the position of the master controller, since vehicle data suggests that train operators are unaware that adjusting it many times in quick succession may not allow the brakes to adequately load in the selected position. WMSC staff are also continuing to monitor Metrorail's vehicle rehabilitations. This week, our staff are observing 6000 series coupler overhaul training being provided to Metrorail by the coupler's original equipment manufacturer. This is an early step in Metrorail's process to determine how to safely restore the 6000 series cars to service following the 2 train pull-aparts last fall. On June 24th, the commissioners denied a petition from WMATA related to the WMSC's fitness for duty audit. The petition requested that the WMSC reconsider a portion of its directive to WMATA to submit records necessary for the audit. WMATA's request was to withhold drug and alcohol testing information related to Metro Transit Police Department employees. This is contrary to federal regulations and WMSC requirements. MTPD officers are Metrorail employees designated by WMATA as responsible for safety, and they serve as first responders who play a key role in the safety of passengers, other first responders, and workers. FTA regulations require the release of these drug and alcohol testing records to the WMSC in a number of circumstances, including triennial safety audits. WMATA submitted its petition months after initial documents for this audit were due. WMSC staff are now finalizing the draft of the fitness for duty audit. The audit timing was specified on the schedule provided to WMATA last October, communicated in the notification letter for this audit, and then extended to allow WMATA additional time to provide documents that Metrorail only holds in paper form. The commissioners also approved a change to the program standard just last week to reflect Metrorail's Safety Department's new incident management official and the role that that individual can play in ensuring safety events are properly documented and ensuring that perishable evidence is not lost. This adjustment to the program standard allows Metrorail's IMO in specific cases to gather information and determine when it is acceptable to release the scene under Metrorail policies and under the requirements set in our program standard. In other cases, mainly serious events that result in detailed investigations that often rely on perishable evidence, Metrorail will continue to contact the WMSC to obtain our approval to release the scene before moving the affected equipment and restoring service. Separately, the WMSC Finance and Operations Committee met last week. And following discussions held during that meeting, the WMSC has exercised a contract option to initiate its second independent financial audit. The work will get underway later this week, with WMSC's fiscal year set to end tomorrow. Also on the business front, we are proud to report that we are exceeding our disadvantaged business enterprise or DBE goal of 4.3%. As we recently reported to the FTA in our last semi-annual report, we achieved 9.13% for the period ending this month, and we achieved 17.13% for the period ending in December 2020, which was our prior semi-annual report. These numbers really demonstrate our continued commitment and focus in this area. Thank you, and this concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer? Hearing none, we will move on to safety event investigations. I'm going to start with the consent agenda. We have 2 reports on our consent agenda today. These both relate to deliberate acts by customers. Federal Transit Administration requires that these events be investigated as accidents. Does any commissioner have any questions about either of these 2 reports? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0082 and Whiskey 0083?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Lobby. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Commissioner Farrar Dyke. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote. Allison, General Counsel Fultz.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. The reports are approved.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. The next item on the agenda is safety investigations, and I would like to ask WMSC Emergency Management Specialist Richard David and Traction Power Expert Tino Sahu to provide our first investigation report. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0084 involves a safety event related to the loss of third rail power and eventual customer evacuation.
Richard,
Mr. David, if you're speaking, we are unable to hear you.
I'm going to suggest we have Tino pick up.
Sure. I'll go ahead and just fill in. So I think where Richard left in the eventual customer evacuation.
We lost you as well, Tino.
You've lost me as well.
I hear you now. Go ahead and try it again.
Okay. In the eventual customer evacuation, Metro Transit Police Department (MTPD) personnel, who Metro has designated as responsible for the safety of customers in emergencies, ignored safety procedures and evacuated customers without placing warning strobe and alarm devices with SODs on the roadway. MTPD and Metro also did not follow incident command protocols. Due to MTPD not using these safety devices, DC Fire and EMS did not assist with the evacuation. So I'll move on to the power part of the investigation. So the initial power issues occurred after power work that WMATA had been conducting in the area. The tiebreaker station had been restored to service the day before this event after a DC switchgear replacement with the new Seshron systems, which is a new Seshron DC switchgear lineup. The Georgia Avenue Petworth Traction Power Substation had a solid state electromechanical DC overcurrent protective relay that failed on a breaker feeding third rail or contact rail. This caused the breaker to intermittently trip or go on and off. Another relay called the reclosing relay or load measuring relay, also of the electromechanical type, checks to ensure no faults are present in the electrical system before automatically closing the feeder breaker. The continuous opening of the breaker by the failed overcurrent relay and then the closing of the breaker by the reclosing relay caused the reclosing relay to burn out. Both relays are more than 25 years old, putting them about twice their expected useful life. So when this breaker 32 tripped in Georgia Avenue Petworth Traction Power Substation due to the failed DC overcurrent relay, the load was shifted to Fort Totten tiebreaker station number 2, breaker 64. This redundant power feed did not work because a relay protective function on the newly activated DC feeder breakers was not set at the correct sensitivity. It was set too low. Since this inverse definite minimum time overcurrent protection sensitivity was set too low, the breaker tripped, which de-energized the third rail. In the tiebreaker station that had the new switchgear installed and just put online, the IDMT setting, which is the time inverse overcurrent, had been set to the level of Metrowell's old VG control relays, which are the original digital relays installed in the system. However, the new switchgear made by Seshron requires a higher setting as it has a different internal algorithm than the relays made by VG controls. Inverse definite minimum time is a protective function to protect the breaker against excessive current that could damage the breaker. It trips the circuit breaker if the current exceeds a given threshold, which in electrical terms is called a pickup level, and if the overload lasts longer than a delay, in electrical terms, a time dial setting. The inverse correlation between current and time means higher current faults will operate the overcurrent relay faster than lower ones, hence why they call it an inverse time overcurrent relationship. Since the reclosing or load measuring relay burnt out on breaker 32 at Georgia Avenue traction power substation, the relay lost its negative reference, which prevented both the remote and manual closing of the breakers. After this event, this reclosing relay was jumpered out of the circuit to temporarily be able to close circuit breaker 32, and then the relay was later replaced. The failed DC overcurrent relay was replaced as well. The IDTM relay protective function was temporarily disabled on all the DC feeder breakers in Fort Totten tiebreaker number 2 to prevent the nuisance tripping that had occurred. These measures allowed for the third rail to be energized and the resumption of revenue service. The relay manufacturer Seshron has provided new settings for this protective function IDTM. These settings will be tested offline via the statistical mode on the Seshron relays. This will allow WMATA to see how these settings react to actual revenue service, but only in the background without actually making the setting active in a way that could inadvertently trip a breaker. After the test data is reviewed, Metro Rail will be able to make the appropriate revised settings active. In the meantime, several other more traditional protective functions remain in place. You do have your instantaneous trip, your long time overcurrent, your short time overcurrent, and your rate of rise. Traction power maintenance and maintenance way engineering have begun to work to replace or modernize all solid state relays in the Metrowell system with the newer digital microprocessor based relays. So I'll jump in just with the timeline of events. So at approximately 7:30 p.m. on December 13th, about an hour and a half before the main event at issue here, the ROC had de-energized third rail power on track 2 between Fort Totten and Georgia Avenue Petworth stations for a CAT report on the tracks. The event began to wrap up just before a scheduled 9 p.m. Rail Operations Control Center shift from the downtown facility at Metro Rail headquarters to the main facility at the Carmen Turner facility in Maryland. The ROC downtown attempted to restore power at approximately 8:40 p.m. However, 2 breakers in the Georgia Avenue Petworth traction power substation would not close. At 8:44 p.m., while southbound Green Line train 501 was at the platform at Fort Totten Station, third rail power de-energized for approximately 5 seconds. This had occurred several times as other trains were leaving the station platform. A northbound train entered Fort Totten Station. As that train departed at 8:47 p.m., power again de-energized on the southbound track for 55 seconds. The ROC dispatched a traction power crew to the Georgia Avenue Petworth traction power substation. At 8:57 p.m., train 502 departed toward Georgia Avenue Petworth. Approximately 10 seconds later, power de-energized and the train stopped. Power briefly re-energized as another southbound Yellow Line train approached Fort Totten Station. Power then de-energized again at 8:58 p.m. when 2 breakers tripped uncommanded and Fort Totten tiebreaker station number 2. Both train 502 and train 308 stopped due to the loss of power. The operator of train 308 radioed to the ROC that their train had no dynamic braking and reduced propulsion. The controller instructed the operator to proceed in P3 power mode. The operator of train 502 reported that their train was slowly coming to a stop on emergency lighting with no third rail power. The rail controller asked the train operator of train 502 operate in P3 power mode, but the operator reiterated that the train had no power. ROC controllers attempted to remotely close the breakers to restore power, but that did not work. At 9 p.m., a rail transportation supervisor at Fort Totten Station looked down the tracks toward train 308 just outside the station. At 9:16 p.m., the ROC assistant superintendent provided the first notification to MTPD. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Tino. I'll pick up the timeline, and thank you for picking up for me where I left off. At 9:24 p.m., 2 MTPD employees went beyond the handrail at Fort Totten Station without the required work rate protection to walk to train 308. At approximately 9:36 p.m., 2 other MTPD employees went beyond the end gate without the required worker roadway protection. Metro Rail did not immediately call for DC fire and EMS assistance. Communications were further complicated by a ROC shift changeover between the backup facility downtown and the main facility in Landover, and an incomplete handoff between the outgoing and incoming fire liaisons. MTPD staff also participated in a non-work-related conversation with the fire liaison during the event. The handoffs were further complicated by the event involving the cat on the roadway that disrupted the typical handoff process. The challenge relates to moving between facilities. The new incident management official now being implemented presents an opportunity to improve this transition. At 9:32 p.m., a Rail Operations Information Center specialist asked their assistant superintendent, whether a 911 call should be made. That assistant superintendent asked the MTPD dispatcher if DC fire and EMS was needed, and the MTPD said they had not requested it. At 9:38 p.m., the outgoing Maintenance Operations Center assistant superintendent stated that a determination had been made to evacuate the train, and that the ROC assistant superintendent had stated that the ROIC specialist had called for DC fire and EMS assistance. At 9:38 p.m., DC's Office of Unified Communications dispatched firefighters to the Fort Totten Station for a report of a train stuck on the tracks. It is not clear whether Metro Rail fully communicated in their call to 911 center that there were 2 trains stuck in different locations. At 9:40 p.m., Traction Power personnel informed MOC that radio communications were bad in the tiebreaker station. MOC instructed that employee to notify other personnel not to energize the tiebreakers. MTPD also later informed MOC that their radios also could not transmit in the tunnels. At 9:47 p.m., DC Fire and EMS stated that they had established a unified command with MTPD. MTPD later made decisions outside of that command process. At approximately 9:55 p.m., Metro Transit Police brought customers from train 308 onto the roadway without proper protective equipment required by Metro Rail's procedures. MTPD did not place a warning strobe and alarm device, or WASAD, that provided notice if third rail power is inadvertently restored. 7 customers proceeded onto the roadway, then onto the catwalk into the Fort Totten station. At this point, Metro Rail had not fully dispatched MTPD or requested DC Fire and EMS respond to Georgia Avenue Petworth, which was closer to the other stranded train. MTPD and DC Fire and EMS at Fort Totten determined that they would move the existing responders to the Georgia Avenue Petworth station. They arrived outside the station at approximately 10:16 p.m. DC Fire and EMS responders also brought their WASADs into the station, and an OEM employee who arrived later also brought an additional WASAD. However, MTPD did not place this safety equipment on the roadway. DC Fire and EMS personnel correctly indicated that this is safety equipment that is required by Metro Rail procedures. Because MTPD did not follow these safety procedures, DC Fire and EMS remained on the platform and did not enter the roadway. MTPD personnel and a rail transportation supervisor entered the roadway without the safety equipment and assisted with the customer evacuation. The 13 customers who had been stranded on the train for approximately an hour and 45 minutes reached the Georgia Avenue station platform at approximately 10:42 p.m. Following this event, Metro Rail reviewed the fire liaison turnover process, and the regional fire liaison program manager reviewed the handoff procedures between locations. In this event, the on-duty fire liaison left the downtown headquarters for the Maryland ROCC facility when it appeared that the cat on the roadway event had wrapped up. A backup fire liaison covering at the time at the downtown headquarters, but due to a lack of space, he was placed in a room adjacent to the ROCC, and Metro Rail personnel did not clearly communicate with him. MTPD committed to developing an incident response and an incident command checklist. The WMSC has observed and communicated similar deficiencies in MTPD's response in the connection with the response to the October 9th, 2020 train pull-apart near Union Station, and a preliminary in the response to the March 26, 2021 disabled train that later resulted in a runaway train event. This event also suggests that MTPD personnel do not fully understand the operations in the rail system, including the need to hot stick and confirm power is down and to coordinate with the ROCC to ensure proper roadway protection is in place. MTPD did not follow safety rules meant to protect customers, workers, and first responders. This suggests that MTPD may need more specific ongoing training on operating safely in the rail system and the rail system's characteristics. In response to those events and prior to WMSC's findings, WMATA is in the process of implementing additional emergency response procedures and protocols that Metro Rail intends to limit the length of time customers may be stuck on a train, and they are intended to improve the urgencies of emergency response. MTPD and TRPM personnel reported communication issues that were so significant. Cell phones were used rather than radio system to provide updates during the event. Yet, Metro Rail's communication section, COM, closed out the work orders by stating that they spoke to several individuals who said that there were no issues. This does not reflect the systematic safety approach WMATA has committed to under its agency safety plan that requires the full evaluation and mitigation of hazards. These communication issues also led to employees, including an MTPD sergeant, not having all the required information. This creates a significant challenge, even with the evacuation of a very small number of customers. TRPM disabled and later followed both additional analysis and information from the manufacturer. Adjusted protective settings for the new switchgear, as Mr. Sahu explained earlier. This event also demonstrates the hazards posed by obstruction and narrow pathways on the emergency catwalks. The blocked paths by material or built-in items contributed to the need for MTPE officers and customers to be on the roadway. And this could impede emergency egress in other circumstances. MTPD employees who contributed to this improper evacuation without required safety equipment were not tested as required by WMATA's drug and alcohol policy. Thank you, and that completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. David and Mr. Sahu. This report is very troubling in a number of ways. It raises many questions because there are so many issues. Like, for example, when I hear things breaking, to me, that makes me wonder, are there design issues? Are there maintenance issues? Are there training issues? Why are things breaking as opposed to being replaced before they go so bad that they're going to break? Or we also heard about the problem with the communications. I thought that had been taken care of a long time ago, that communications wasn't a problem anymore. The required roadway worker protection, that's hard to understand how all of the employees who are going to be on the roadway don't have that, either don't know about it or know about it but don't have it, don't have the required roadway worker protection. They're just lots of sort of high level issues. Then the call to the 911 center, 911 center, it sounded like you weren't clear what they said. I thought those calls were recorded. So there are lots of sort of higher level issues. I'm not sure who I should ask this question to, but I'm just wondering, what is the general state of being of this system for me to be highlighting so many different types of errors?
Chair Hart, I'll just touch base on from the power perspective. Valid point. If equipment's getting to the end of its life expectancy, there should be plans in place to mitigate that issue. I think one thing we could potentially recommend is increased PMI frequencies for this older equipment. Gives them not from only a visual standpoint, but actually doing whatever the procedures in the PMI on an increased basis, so that until those older relays are changed out, that would prevent any of these these failures.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other comments from anybody? Or let me open it up now to questions from the other commissioners, because I doubt if I'm the only one who has questions about this report. Any other commissioners have any questions?
Chair Hart, this is Commissioner Lobby. I have some questions.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I'm going to pretend like I understand the power supply issues. I don't, but I think there's reasonable explanations for what's going on. What I really can't understand, though, is how the MTPD, who responds to all these emergencies and apparently is certified on all the processes and procedures used in an emergency, how they could ignore all the requirements. No WASEDs were using, no warning strobes, the incident command protocols were ignored. So much so that DC Fire and EMS refused to enter the roadway because of the potential danger that it posed. no hot sticking. There was no drug and alcohol testing after the fact. Why, is there an explanation? Why doesn't the Metro Transit Police Department know what the requirements are? And secondly, why aren't they following them? Does anybody have an answer for that?
I don't think we have a clear answer for you, Mr. Lobby, but it's something we will be requesting their training material, the RWP certifications, why SAFE has to instruct or teach the RWP classes to transit, what level are they being taught, level 1, 3, 4. Also, are they doing recertifications, or is it a one-time thing that they are taught during the academy process? So those are questions that we need to ask and really dig into.
And for the individuals that ignored the different requirements that are in place, the safety rules, unauthorized access to the roadway, are there no consequences for these individuals who basically, violated a whole bunch of rules?
Commissioner Lobby, I'm gonna quickly just expound on what Adam said. Just for some of that information, we'll be doing we have an upcoming audit on emergency management and safety. So we'll be looking into that, into the audit. As far as them not being accountable.
Well, let me ask you this, was there any consequences for any of the individuals from the Metro Transit Police Department? Were there any consequences for any of their actions that you know of?
That's unknown at this time, sir.
Okay. That I think is pretty disturbing, and I see that MTPD wants to establish a checklist, but I think these issues go well beyond a checklist. There's hundreds of things that went wrong in this response, and I'm not confident that they're going to be adequately addressed by Metro. I'm not quite sure what to do about that.
Well, let me add to Commissioner Lobby's question, because unless I misunderstand the sequence of events, it appears to me that not only did the police officers expose themselves to danger, but they exposed also to danger the passengers that they evacuated. Is that true, that they were also subject to the same dangers?
Yes, sir. That is correct. If anyone enters the roadway without any kind of roadway protection, then it's a danger to anybody involved who's on the track.
So that would appear to me to be much more serious than just the fact that they expose themselves to danger, that they also expose the customers to danger as well. Does anybody have any comment on the communications difficulty? I thought that had been solved a long time ago. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? And what can we do about it to get them to fix it at this point in time if it's still a problem after years after it's first identified as a serious safety issue?
Chair Hart, this is Shamila Samarasinghe here. I'm struggling to get my camera working. There you go. On the front of communications, as you heard, as staff was describing, the requirements, the processes are in place. It requires the Metro Rail employees carrying those out sincerely and earnestly. So when there are pervasive communication issues that are reported by several individuals from Metro Rail in this event, the fact that maximum work orders were opened and were summarily dismissed by whoever at communications within COM to say they spoke to some people and there wasn't any reported issues, that just does not compile with the process. And so the process requires them to go out, make assessments out in the field, try to reconstruct or replicate the same failures. That is what is required. And so the processes, the written requirements are in place. The employees who are required to carry them out need to do so sincerely, because they have responsibilities for maintaining the system and the safety of everybody who comes into contact with that system.
My sense of it at this point is to send this report back for some further edification on some of these issues that we have highlighted, and see, because I'm not happy with a report that just talks about what the issues are without talking about what we're going to do to solve those problems. That, to me, it hasn't really answered the mail. So that I'm thinking of sending this report back for more action, more work by the staff to address some of these higher level issues and try to put some closure to this, to make it clear that where there's a problem, we're going to make sure we're not going to stop messing with it until we have come up with an adequate solution.
Chairman Hart, I think that's a very valid approach. This is an incident that had, you know, many problems, and I think it's a very important incident, even though it did not result in property damage or injuries to passengers or employees. I think it's very important because of all the different things that seem to go wrong, and although it was not a severe incident, it could have been much more severe if we had other incidents associated with this particular problem. So I think that there's a lot that all of these different issues that are there, we need to have good answers on how they're going to be corrected moving forward, or I think we're going to continue to see these emergency response issues over and over and over again if we don't, you know, draw the line and ask for a good response from Washington Metro and how they're going to fix these issues.
Any thoughts from any other commissioners? Thank you for that, Commissioner Lobby.
Chair Hart, just to add, over the past year, there's been an increased focus on the rock. And as we all know, there's been a transformation team. They brought in a new rock director. But until WMATA starts looking outside of the rock and holding other departments accountable, make sure the training is up to par and held to the same standard that the rock controllers and other members of the rock are, we will still see these type of events happening.
Well, thank you for that. General Counsel Foltz, do I need a vote to send this back for further action, or what's the next step on that?
I don't believe you need a formal vote, although if we were to hold a vote, it would be very clear that the board's action is to send the report back. So we could handle it either way. I think as a matter of clarity, a vote would make it absolutely without question what the board's intent was.
Okay, then in that case, is there a motion to send Whiskey 0084 back to the staff for further action?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Is there a second?
A second.
Second.
Thank you. We got 2 seconds. Thank you for that. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct our recorded vote.
Okay, great. And I heard Commissioner Farrar-Dyke as the second coming in just before the other voice. I just wanted to note before I conduct this vote, I confirm that Commissioner Rush joined the meeting just after the roll call at the outset of the meeting. And he has also indicated that he votes to approve the minutes of the May 18th, 2021 public meeting. So just wanted to be sure that the record reflected all of that. And with that, I will go ahead and conduct the vote to send the report in W84 back to WMATA for additional information and clarification. Chairman Hart.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
And Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. The report will be returned to WMATA.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Foltz. Investigation Program Manager Adam Quigley will present our remaining reports. Mr. Quigley?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0085 involves improper roadway protection near Fort Cotton Station on December 12th, 2020. Just prior to a rock controller shift change, an outgoing controller properly granted foul time protection to a traction power maintenance crew that had just completed their primary overnight work. The crew needed foul time to move to a different area to restore power ahead of the system's opening for Saturday morning revenue service. Foul time protection is meant to ensure that no rail vehicle moves through the work area while the work crew is on the roadway. However, while the work crew was still on the roadway, a different rail controller who had taken over the desk gave permission to the equipment operator of a prime mover to move through the area where the work crew had foul time protection on the green and yellow line tracks. The work crew fled the roadway from the interlocking when they saw the prime mover's lights moving toward them. The crew entered the tiebreaker station room. The equipment operator stopped the prime mover and checked with the work crew for any injuries. The investigation demonstrates that the incoming controller removed all protections for the work crew on the roadway after taking over the desk, despite a turnover that included the fact that this work crew remained on the roadway. This event highlights the importance of training and ongoing operational oversight to ensuring safety. Metrorail must also consider specific processes to ensure that incoming controllers review all aspects of their territory and maintain full situational awareness. The controller who incorrectly provided an absolute block through a work zone was retrained. The ROC developed and distributed a lessons learned document based on this and other instances of improper roadway worker protection. ROC management also issued a memorandum instructing incoming controllers to establish radio communications with any personnel under foul time. This completes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. A couple of things you mentioned, lessons learned document. You also mentioned a memorandum instructing incoming controllers about radio communications. Do you know what happens to those? What do they do with those pieces of paper? How do we know that those actually accomplish anything? What do you know about that?
The lessons learned are issued to each controller or department personnel, and they sign for them. They're signed for the lessons learned. They're also posted on the board in the ROC or in the divisions at yards.
So do we have any way of knowing that the information on that lesson was actually read and absorbed? Do we have any way to follow through with that?
Other than requesting maybe safety briefings to see if this was discussed, through, by managers to their employees, no, there's no way to ensure that employees even read them, even though they signed for them.
So the same question with the memorandum instructing incoming controllers to establish radio communications, is that we don't have a good sense of what happens to that document either, and whether people read it and absorb it?
The memorandum for controllers are discussed through safety briefings before their shift starts, and they sign for them. It's talked about, prior to their shift, so everybody has a basic understanding.
Okay, thank you. Let me open this up to questions from any of the other commissioners. Any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Quigley?
I was just going to ask, are lessons learned only for that individual, or is it for everyone to realize what the incident happened?
It is sent out to the entire department that was involved.
So lessons learned are for everyone to sign off, not just that individual who? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
When they do a turnover from one controller to the other, is it a face-to-face meeting? Do you see the controller that you're relieving and have a chance to get a rundown of what's going on?
Yes.
So this particular controller, did he get a rundown on the protections that were in place and what was going on the system from the previous controller?
Yes, they did.
And they didn't mention this, or they took the protections off anyhow?
It was brought up. It was talked about during the turnover based on ambient recordings. The foul shift controller informed the morning shift controller that this personnel was under foul time, that they were restoring a red tag, closing the breakers for a red tag work location that would happen overnight. And the morning controller took it as that they were in the traction power room and was unaware that there were personnel still in the roadway outside of the room. It was a large group of employees. Not all of them could fit into the tiebreaker or traction power room safely. So the RIC had some of them stand outside. Regardless of that, foul time is foul time. You don't let any trains move through that area until that RIC is relinquished and in a place of safety.
Thank you.
So what was the lesson learned? If
Lessons
there were
learned.
already rules, protocol, so what is the lesson learned if they had instructions on what to do?
That's a good question. The lessons learned just highlighted the importance of reading your railroad when you come in, understanding the turnover that you get if you don't understand something, to ask questions, and review all your documents and materials that you have to do your job, to utilize to do your job, before you make decisions like this.
So nothing really changed. It's just to re-emphasize what you should be doing.
Right. There, like you said, there are rules and procedures in place for this. They were ignored. The lessons learned was to bring that to light and remind controllers, what the procedures are.
How many lessons learned go by before there's a change? All right, thank you.
Well, that raised the general question that I had. I don't think it's worth stopping this report for, but I think I am considering asking the staff to look into lessons learned and see how effective they are, and look into lessons learned and see were lessons learned not actually learned, and the problem that resulted in the lesson learned being issued is still happening, or did the lesson learned solve that problem? I'm not sure how to look into that, but I don't want to stop this report for that, but I am thinking about asking the staff to do a lessons learned study, so to speak, to see how effective that process is, and if not effective, to recommend a more effective process for getting out critical safety information.
And I would mention that Metro issues a lot of lessons learned, and Metro has a recognition now that it needs to do a rewrite of the Metro Rail Rules and Procedures, Safety Rules and Procedures Handbook, the MSRPH, and that is a project that is gearing up. Staff have been hired for it, and the safety department will be leading it. And we are paying very close attention to sort of the decisions that are made here at the early outset of this project. It will be a long-running project, but one of my hopes is that on the other side of this project, there will be significantly less need to explain the procedures by issuing these lesson learns, that the rule book will be in a much better place to speak for itself.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer. That's a very important higher level perspective on the issue, because I don't want to be in the situation of just of fixing the symptom, but not addressing the cause. So with that, are there any other questions for Mr. Quigley on Whiskey 0085? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt the investigation report Whiskey 0085?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Lobby moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rush, second. Thank you. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Safety Investigation Report W85 is approved.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, would you present the next report, please?
Thank you, Gerard. Investigation Whiskey 0086 involves improper vehicle movement on the red line on December 30th, 2020. The Rail Operations Control Center controller improperly allowed a train in non-revenue service toward Glenmont Station to proceed toward a maintenance vehicle that was waiting to enter the Brentwood Rail Yard. The roadway maintenance machine, or RMM, prime mover 46, had been given an absolute block. That means that no other vehicles are supposed to be in that segment of track. This type of block is intended to protect against collisions. The prime mover had initially been heading to Glenmont Rail Yard following overnight work, but at 5 a.m., the ROC directed the equipment operator to instead exit the mainline tracks into Brentwood Rail Yard to limit impacts on the revenue service as the system began to open. The prime mover arrived at Brentwood Yard entrance at approximately 5:20 a.m. 5 minutes later, a rock controller who had just come on duty, removed protective measures known as a prohibit exit from signal Bravo 0304 and set a lunar or proceed signal for train 115 to enter Noma Gallaudet University Station. However, prime mover 46 was still stopped just beyond the station, waiting to enter Brentwood Yard. The vehicles came within about 1,200 feet of each other without required safety protections in place. Metrorail retrained the controller involved in this event. While not listed as specific corrective action related to this event, Metrorail has since begun to roll out its required safety management system, specified in its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan in the rocks since this event occurred. SMS includes an effective safety culture where everyone from frontline workers through supervisors and managers to the top of the organization share in a commitment to safety and continuous improvement. The rollout and Metrorail's other required actions tied to WMSC's ROCS findings are intended to improve these areas where Metrorail has historically had deficiencies. It completes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions for Mr. Quigley from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0086?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Al-Khatib, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rush, second. I will now ask General Counsel Allison Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull is absent. Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Safety Investigation Report W86 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, would you please present the next report?
Thank you, Chair. Investigation Whiskey 0087 involves improper door operation at Capitol Heights Station on December 29th, 2020. In this event, a rail transportation supervisor had improperly entered the operating cab of the final train of the evening toward Largo Town Center, outside of Metrorail rules and procedures. For several stops, the supervisor operated the doors of the train while the train operator only handled train movement, which is contrary to Metrorail rules and procedures. At Capitol Heights Station, the supervisor attempted to open the doors prior to the train being properly berthed. The train operator then hit the OK button and the supervisor opened the doors on the correct side of the train while the train operator opened the doors on the incorrect side of the train. While both said they heard two doors opening chimes in close proximity, they did not believe anything was wrong since the supervisor looked out the platform side window and saw the doors were opened on the platform side. Only after the supervisor had closed the platform side doors and the train would not move did they identify that the doors had also opened on the wrong side. Neither the train operator nor the supervisor immediately reported this improper door operations to the Rail Operations Control Center. A ground walk around required by Metrorail safety procedures was not performed. The station manager approached the operating cab to inform the train operator and supervisor of door operation issues, and the station manager reported the improper door operation to the ROC assistant superintendent. When the ROC contacted the Archer supervisor, the supervisor acknowledged being in the operating cab during the event and that the doors had opened on both sides of the train. Metrorail did not remove the supervisor from service for post-event drug and alcohol testing as required by Metrorail policy. In conjunction with responses to other events and WMSC actions, Metrorail is planning to improve on-the-job training for operators, ride check processes, and reoccurring qualification requirements. Rail Transportation produced a lessons learned document discussing this event, associated hazards, safety rules, and SOPs, and the importance of supervisors notifying the ROC before riding in an operating cab. Both the train operator and supervisor involved received refresher training. This completes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. This one also raises several questions. There's a lessons learned document once again, but I'm also wondering about handling the doors and operating the train. What is the rule on handling the doors and operating the train?
It should have been left up to the operator. Supervisor should not have been involved in helping or assisting the train operator with the doors.
So both of those actions need to be done by the same person, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what do we know about the drug testing not being conducted?
That, I don't have an answer for you, sir, on that, on why they were not removed or tested.
But I would tell you that this is an issue that we anticipate addressing, not for this specific investigation, but this issue in general is handled in our fitness for duty audit, the draft of which is under review.
Okay, so what I didn't want to have happen was have this non-compliance occur without any action taking it in response to this non-compliance. So what you're saying is that our upcoming audit will address this issue. Is that what you're suggesting, Dr. Meyer?
Yes, it's not specifically in response to this incident, but
Right.
the overall drug testing process and specifically post-incident testing is addressed in our audit, or will be addressed in our audit.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley on this one?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lowry.
Mr. Quigley, you talk about the rail supervisor improperly entering the cab. Can you tell me what's an improper entry versus what's a proper time for a supervisor to ride in the cab?
It was considered improper because they never granted or asked Rock's permission to ride in the cab. So that, according to Metro Rail rules, they have to ask Rock for permission to ride in the cab.
So if the supervisor, contacted Rock and said, I want to ride in the cab, would they automatically have allowed that?
Yeah, they would want to know why, what the purpose is, if they were doing a spot check, and basically just, kind of re-instruct them, remind them not to interfere with any type of operations with the train operator.
Well, okay, so that's clear. The rail supervisor would basically, where would he be located? Would he be occupying the left side of the train or left side of the cab? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is he operating the doors because he's in the way of the operator who needs to go over to that side to take care of the doors?
It is an inconvenience to have a supervisor probably standing over there. There are other areas that supervisor could have moved to right in front of the cab door to allow the operator to get up and move to the left side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Quigley? Okay, well, on the basis of Dr. Meyer's statement that we're going to be looking into the drug testing protocol to see how rigorous that is, I'm willing to let this report go through even without any mention of what was done regarding the person who should have ordered the drug test and didn't. So I'm willing to let it go without that in this particular report and make this available for approval at this time. So having said that, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0087?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Rush. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you for the second. Was that Commissioner El-Khatib?
Commissioner Lobby.
Commissioner
Commissioner
Lobby.
Lobby.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the motion and the second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke.
I'll abstain on this one. Is that
Okay,
allowable?
I've recorded that. Commissioner Rush
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you. So we have 4 votes to adopt the report, and Commissioner Farrar Dyke has abstained.
And does that, I take that means that it is passed due to the 4 votes?
Yes, we have sufficient votes to adopt the report.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, would you please present the next report?
This investigation Whiskey 0088 involves another improper door operation at Franconia Springfield Station on December 16th, 2020. In this event, the operator of the 8-car Blue Line train stopped and opened the train doors with the trailing 2 cars still off the platform. The train operator stopped the train near the 6-car marker rather than the 8-car marker and stated they were not aware that the 3000 series train was an 8-car consist. The terminal supervisor attempted to contact the train operator when the train stopped, but the train operator did not respond until after they had opened the doors. Metrorail has required all trains to stop only at the 8-car marker as part of a rules-based effort to avoid this type of event. The train operator and terminal supervisor performed a ground walk around and did not identify any damage, injuries, or customers on the roadway. This train operator had approximately 1 year of experience. In an investigation interview, the train operator said that they thought stopping at the 6-car marker was acceptable since they believed they had a 6-car consist, and stopping short of the end of the platform would save them time for a needed personal relief break. The operator had been operating a 6-car train earlier in the morning on the previous trip to Largo Town Center and was directed on arrival to Largo to quickly move to this 8-car train that was ready to depart. Metrorail does not have a pre-trip inspection requirement for operators taking over a new train and allows operators to be on the train as few as 2 minutes before departure. The train operator said that while operating the new train back to Franconia Springfield, they identified at Pentagon Station that they would require a personal relief break, but they thought they could make it to Franconia Springfield. The train operator did not request this relief break from the ROC at any point. By the time of the arrival at Franconia Springfield, this break was urgently needed. The train operator underwent retraining, and Metrorail's Rail Transportation Department developed and circulated a lessons learned document related to this and other improper door operation events. This completes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. This is another lesson learned one, so I think after we're done with this, I'm going to ask the staff to dig more deeply into the whole lessons learned situation and see what we can find out about it. Meanwhile, what I would like to know is how important is it for the operator to know how many cars are in his consist?
Very important. It also shows on their console, how many cars are in the consist as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is there any information in the cab that shows how many cars are in the consist?
Yes, sir.
Was that working at this time?
Yes, sir.
So in theory, by looking at that, is it pretty obvious, easy to see? I mean, how would an operator not know how many cars are in the consist? Or is it just an expectation because he previously did a 6-car train?
I think it was just out of habit, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, because I'm just wondering that you've answered my question about was it known? So it seems to me that that's pretty egregious not to notice, not to be aware for reasons obvious, like in this case here, stopping an 8-car train at the 6-car spot. So that means you got two cars not by the station. So that it's obviously important for that purpose. But just in general, it seems like I would want to know how many cars are in my consist, and they tell them that in the cab. So what was the lessons learned document about? Was it about that, or was it about something else?
The lessons learned document was about stop all trains, making all trains, regardless of 6 or 8, stop at the 8-car marker. You take it all the way to the 8-car marker to ensure all doors and cars are on the platform.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
Just a comment from me, Chair Hart.
Yes.
I don't, Mr. Quigley said it's important for them to know how many cars are in the train, but if every train is supposed to stop at the 8-car marker, I would think that information is a little redundant, that doesn't matter if they have 2 cars, 4 cars, 6 cars, 8 cars, they're all going to go to the 8-car marker. And that's really the emphasis of the safety issue for this particular accident. Is there any other use for the knowing how many cars are in the train, Mr. Quigley?
No, that's a good point, sir.
But the requirement, is it a safety rule or a procedure or whatever that says you always stop at the 8-car marker and nowhere else?
Yes.
So if a manager observed somebody stopping somewhere besides the 8-car marker, even if they had a 6-car train, they stopped at the 6-car marker, would that be basically a violation of the policies and procedures or the safety rules?
Yes, sir, unless they were instructed to do so. Maybe if there's something that in the roadway within the platform limits up by the 8-car marker, it would be, beneficial for that operator to know how many cars are in their consist. So if they can't properly berth, they can let Rock know, or that if they don't stop at the 8-car marker, they're going to have some trains or cars hanging off the platform.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. I had that same question because I can remember the day when the trains didn't necessarily stop at the end of the station. They stopped depending on at a place that depended on the length of the train. So, Mr. Quigley, do you happen to have any idea why they went to that rule that everybody goes to the end of the station?
To avoid situations like this, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners?
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I would think that everyone would need to know how many cars they had on their train for emergency situations. Whether you have 4 or 8, knowing how much of a level you have to do to evacuate in case you had to, how many people are on the train, or how many cars you had. So I think that's something that they should know, regardless of where they stop, how many cars they have.
It's really basic situation awareness. Agreed.
Yes.
And one of the things that drove the stopping position to change from the center point of the platform to the 8-car marker is the continued manual operations of the rail system. In the old days, the automation assisted with the stopping, and now it's up to the operator to berth the train properly, much more than it ever was.
So moving the stopping point to the end of the platform is a way to help prevent precisely this type of event, I take it. Okay, thank you. Any more questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0088?
So moved.
So moved, Commissioner Alcantara. Is there a second? I'll second it myself. There's a motion and a second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
And Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you. That's unanimous, and report W88 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, will you please present the next report?
Yes, sir. Investigation Whiskey 0089 involves a red signal overrun at Eastern Market Station, December 15th, 2020. This red signal overrun occurred just prior to the start of revenue service. The train operator of an employee train used to bring station managers to their post reverse ends at Eastern Market and then move the train without authorization back in the direction of Largo Town Center. The train operator stopped the train approximately 9 feet beyond red signal Delta 0602 at the Eastern Market interlocking. When the train operator began moving, they radioed the rock controller that they had a lunar or proceed signal and were on the move. When the controller asked that the message be repeated, the train operator said to disregard the message. In an investigation interview, the operator said they said disregard after noticing the signal was red and applying the brakes. Approximately 30 seconds later, the rock controller asked train operator for their location, and the operator said they were holding at the red signal. The train operator did not clearly respond when asked if they were properly berthed at Eastern Market Station. Several minutes after that, a different rock employee told the controller to look at their alarms that showed the train had passed a red signal. When then asked directly, the train operator acknowledged the train had passed the red signal and was in the interlocking. Vehicle downloads collected during the investigation showed that this train had reached a top speed of 7 miles an hour and moved 171 feet before stopping 9 feet beyond the red signal near the end of the station platform. Due to the location of the train and interlocking, rail service was suspended in the area for approximately 30 minutes. The operator had performed the same test several days in a row, and it had always had a lunar or proceed signal at this location when they reverse ends. On this day, though, the signal was red to protect maintenance vehicles that were moving in the area after completing overnight work. The train operator had only been certified for approximately 1 month at the time of this event, following a long layoff between classroom training and practical training. This is one of several events that Metro Rail identified involving operators with less than 3 years of experience. Since this was a 3000 series train, there is no inward or outward facing video available to further determine the operator's actions and to identify additional possible safety improvements. Since a safety stand down that Metro Rail conducted this winter in response to this and several other red signal overrun events, Metro Rail has reported 1 red signal overrun, suggesting that this training was effective. In relation to this specific event, the train operator was retrained and 4 cars of this consist were repaired to address vehicle monitoring system failures. This is another event that demonstrates the benefits of ensuring stop and proceed mode or other redundant protections are in place to reduce the risk of unauthorized train movement with 0 speed commands and past red signals. This completes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for this report? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report whiskey 0089?
So moved.
So moved. I'll second.
Lobby. Commissioner Rush, thank you for motion and second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Great, thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Report W89 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, will you present the next report?
Investigation Whiskey 0090 involves a red signal overrun in the New Carrollton Rail Yard, December 16th, 2020. A train operator of an 8-car 7000 series train incorrectly repeated back movement instructions to the interlocking operator, who affirmed the incorrect instruction. This led to the operator moving the train past a red signal that the interlocking operator had not granted permission to pass. The initial instructions provided an absolute block from New Carrollton Station to signal Delta 9954 with permission to pass red signal Delta 9950. The train operator's repeat back, which was not word for word, did not match the interlocking operator's instruction. Instead, the repeat back stated that the operator had heard permission to pass red signals at both signals, Delta 9950 and Delta 9954. The interlocking operator replied, affirm. After the train passed signal Delta 9954, the interlocking operator contacted the train operator and informed the operator that this was a red signal overrun. Vehicle data demonstrates the train was moving approximately 8 miles an hour when it passed the red signal. The switches at this location were clamped at the time of this event due to an ongoing track circuit malfunction that was preventing the interlocking operator from setting a lunar or proceed signal. This malfunction was first reported around 5:30 a.m. the day of the event, approximately 18 hours before the red signal overrun. The malfunction was resolved earlier the next morning. The train operator and interlocking operator received refresher training, including on radio protocols. Rail Transportation produced and distributed a lessons learned document related to this event. Metro Rail has long opened CAP related to radio discipline and protocols. While performance in this area has improved dramatically in recent years, Metro Rail still must make significant progress, which must continue even after the minimum requirements for closure are met. The WMSC continues to monitor interlocking operators through other oversight activities to assess whether there is proper training, focus, and situational awareness. Thank you. This completes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Here we are with another lessons learned document. I think, Dr. Meyer, I would like to ask you to have the staff look into the effectiveness of lesson learned documents, because I have no clue. I don't have a lot of confidence based on what I'm hearing that lessons learned document is going to be handled appropriately. And by the way, if you think that your work on redoing the rule book is going to eliminate any benefit that a lessons learned document might have, I'll defer to your judgment on that. So, because I did hear you say that you're looking at that issue. So do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Meyer?
Yeah, we're absolutely happy to look into the effectiveness of lessons learned documents and maybe even to do some quantitative study of the issue. They're fairly common in the industry. I mean, I don't know anything about how frequently they're used, but I think most every property uses something like this. For instance, at Metro North Railroad, they're called red alert documents to alert you to something, make sure everybody is aware of the circumstances of an event, and it kind of offered in a "don't let this happen to you" method of situational awareness. But I think it's an interesting question to look into, and I think it would be interesting as well for us to look into whether or not anyone has assessed their effectiveness or any best practices for these documents within the industry. I don't know if that exists out there, and so it would be interesting to look at that. And like I said, we will continue, of course, to keep in close contact with Metro as the safety department there leads the transformation of the rules and the rule book.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley on this report?
I was going to ask, are the lessons learned attached to your report, Mr. Quigley?
Yes. And again, in addition to the lessons learned, they had the safety stand down in January for red signal overruns. And since then, there's only been one this year so far at West Falls Churchyard. So in addition, again, to the lessons learned that's issued to the employees, the involved departments, SAFE did put on a red signal violation safety stand down.
So Commissioner Farrar-Dyke, thank you for asking that question, because it reminded me of a question I wanted to ask, which is what did the lessons learned document talk about?
100% repeat back, proper repeat back.
So it was a read back lessons learned.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley on this report?
Well, one question. So how often has the repeat back been the incorrect repeat back been an issue?
It's usually a contributing factor in all these red signal overruns.
Okay, thank you.
I would mention that our predecessor oversight entities, both the TOC and the FTA, had been concerned in the past over radio discipline, radio procedures, radio terminology, and it's something that a great deal of effort and energy has been paid attention to over the years. And while, as with all things, there's always room for improvement, in my judgment, Metro Rail radio communications have come a very long way in terms of making more frequent use of readback, more frequent use of standardized terminology, the use of the word over and centrals out when ending transmissions. And there's been a whole variety of attention to this issue and improvement as a result. Like I said, always room for improvement, but this is an area that's been significantly focused on.
Well, thank you, Dr. Meyer. Let me ask you a related question there, because in aviation, there's, in addition to readback processes, there's standardization so that you won't confuse words. So it'd be less likely to confuse words. Is that happening in mass transit as well? Do you know?
Well, I mean, every transit property in the country is different from every other one in ways that would never exist in airline operations because of the relentless standardization in aviation. That said, there is also, because of the need to make aviation English the standard all over the world, there is, as you well know, a recognized pilot controller glossary of approved and specific words for specific situations. I think that's unique to aviation, and I don't know that any other mode of transportation has that level of standardization. However, there is a significant level of but maybe less formal standardization that's evolving within Metro simply as a result of tightening up the procedures and the terminology, particularly for roadway worker protection. I mean, I'll just relate a personal anecdote. I was listening to radio traffic just a couple of days ago when an RWIC called for protection to be able to access the tracks, and I heard the controller from the Rock kind of call him out and say, that's not the right way to ask for this. Here's what I need to know from you, and here's the order I want to hear it from you. Let's try it again. And he came back and did a much better job the next time. So you know, it's evolving. It's not perfect, but there is progress being made on this particular front.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So any other questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
Chairman Hart?
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
I just wanted to make an observation here. I looked at the transcript and what the interlocking operator said to the train operator, and you know, without a written warrant or written permission to proceed, you know, I think it may be a bit unrealistic to think that a train operator is going to be able to memorize exactly what the instructions were and repeat it back word for word. And this has troubled me a little bit, because we always seem to have problems with these radio permissions to pass signals, things like this, these track warrants, I'll call them. This isn't the first time this has happened, and there really doesn't seem to be a good method that Washington Metro utilizes to make sure that the train operator has the information, remembers the information, and actually controls his train accordingly. I don't know what the answer is other than being able to send electronic warrants directly to the cab with maybe a monitor or something like that. But this I think goes a little bit beyond radio procedures. It's more, you know, how much information can someone absorb when they're doing other things, such as you know, opening doors and observing passengers on the platform, and you know, the radio coverage we found is not great on Washington Metro to begin with. So I'm not sure that radio procedures is really the final solution for this, but you know, I would suggest that staff, you know, try to get some information on what other properties are doing to make sure that they don't have these issues, because passing a red signal is a big deal. And if you look at the transcript, the interlocking operator gave information on the signal D9954 and then D9950. I gave it in the opposite order, and you know, there was no mention of the D99 part. Just 54 and 50 were mentioned by the train operator. So they have a long way to go if they're looking for word-to-word repeating, and I'm not sure that without some aid, such as a written track warrant or something like that, that operators are going to be able to consistently satisfy this. Just an observation.
It's a worthwhile observation, and obviously, you know, you're hitting on a huge difference between prescriptive FRA rules and the transit world, where in the FRA world, train movement authority has to be conveyed under rule. It has to be conveyed in writing, even if that means a locomotive engineer has to bring the train to a stop so that he or she can safely copy down instructions. And the transit world just simply does not have such a requirement. But that said, it's worth discussing with the safety staff at Metro. The chief safety officer came from the FRA regulated world, and I'm sure she has interesting views on the matter to be discussed.
So when they do receive these instructions, are they stopped, or are they doing other things at the same time? Is this going on while they're multitasking with opening doors or operating the train or observing signals, or do they have to be stopped to basically get this information?
They do not have to be stopped. They could be multitasking, servicing the station, things like that.
You could be doing anything then. Yep.
Right. So, you know, along with your comments, Mr. Lobby, we've started working with SAFE with physical characteristics, you know, having these train operators, supervisors track walkers, also be certified on the territory that they're inspecting, that they're operating on, because even with 100% repeat back where we've seen, some of these individuals aren't understanding what's being, instructed. So even when they come back and repeat it 100%, they're not fully understanding it, maybe because they don't know where that interlocking is or where that signal is. So there was a recent event probably a month ago that kind of brought that to light. And we've been working with SAFE to implement some type of physical characteristics on these people out in the field, so they understand, what the instructions the rock controllers are giving them.
Well, the way in the FRA world, the way the railroads do it is a bit archaic, but at least it's in a very logical order that's followed every time. And you can basically train people on the individual aspects of it because it is so organized. But I think it's just something to keep your ear to the ground on, because if they're not going to go back to automatic train control, this is going to continue to be an issue, and I'm not sure that, again, that radio protocol is going to cure all the problems there. Thank you.
But Bob, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Rush.
Well, just following up on Bob's point, they are planning on going back to automatic train control, aren't they? Isn't that part of their plan?
Eventually. Yes. Dr. Meyer, you would have more information on that.
We have asked Metro to a detailed briefing on their way forward with regard to train control, train operation, ATO, or other systems in the future. They have provided us a detailed briefing on one aspect of that, which is the return to automatic door operations. There's a long road ahead if Metro plans to return to ATO. The appropriate safety view is that it makes sense for Metro to settle into and expect a protracted continued period of manual operations and be governed.
I didn't realize it was that protracted. I thought it was more in the future, more in the immediate future than that. Thank you.
Well, as you know, Commissioner Rush, the automated door thing was a start, and that was a faulty start. So that, to whatever extent that was going to be step number one, they haven't really completed that yet.
Thank you.
So one observation I would make as an airplane pilot is that back in the old days, before things were so electronic, we used to have knee pads on, and we would write down our clearances to help us remember everything. But that's not something that's feasible for a train operator, because the pilot is always seated, whereas a train operator is up and about a lot. So having a knee pad wouldn't really fit in that function. So I just throw that out as an observation of, and rather antiquated observation, but observation nonetheless. Are there any other questions for Mr. Quigley for this report from any of the commissioners? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report whiskey 0090?
So moved.
Commissioner Rush moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, and I didn't see who that was.
Second, Al-Khatib.
Okay, Commissioner Al-Khatib, second. I will now ask General Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Great, thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Safety Event Investigation Report W90 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. Quigley, would you present the next report, please?
Yes, sir. Investigation Whiskey 0091 covers a red signal overrun in the Largo Town Center tail track on approach to the Largo Town Center station that occurred on December 30th, 2020. The operator of train 421 moved their train more than 900 feet beyond a red signal to approach the station platform without permission from the interlocking operator. The signal was red due to another train waiting to depart the station on track 2. No one identified this red signal overrun for approximately 10 minutes. The train passed the signal at approximately 16 miles an hour at 2:41 p.m. At 2:50 p.m., the train operator contacted the interlocking operator regarding the train's location. The interlocking operator then identified and reported the red signal overrun. In an interview, the train operator stated that they thought the interlocking operator had provided a permissive block to the station platform, but that they had personal stress-related distractions that they were focused on at the time. Implementing non-punitive self-reporting systems would have allowed this operator to report this stress issue rather than operate distracted. WMATA policy requires a similar self-reporting system for fatigue. Metrorail has been planning for, but has yet to implement such a non-punitive reporting program. The investigation also identified a separate issue in the Largo tail track area. Interlocking control via the Advanced Information Management System, AIM, as showed as invalid for an extended period, and there are issues with the remote terminal unit and wayside equipment in this area. This contributes to train identification numbers not updating on the platform and creates the risk that duplicate IDs could be created when trains are reblocked by terminal supervisors. This issue in this area has been identified during separate ongoing reviews of duplicate train ID safety concerns. AIM does detect duplicate IDs when they show up in the system, but it is currently one of a long list of alarms. Metrorail is evaluating IT changes that could be implemented in coming months to mitigate the safety issue. That completes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. And this brings to mind another investigation that we did earlier involving identical train numbers. So yes, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report whiskey 0091?
So moved.
Commissioner Lobby moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Al-Khatib. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you. Safety Investigation Report W91 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz, and thank you, Mr. Quigley, for presenting so many reports to us this afternoon. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans. Mr. Karunaratne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The WMC continues to work hard to review, consider, and address the sizable number of WMATA submissions of CAP deliverables, extension requests, and closure requests. Metrorail submitted its draft CAP proposals related to the automatic train control and signaling audit on time at the end of last week. The WMSC team is now reviewing these proposals and other information related to the ATC system and will provide timely feedback to WMATA on any proposed CAPs that can be approved and any others that require revisions to achieve systematic solutions. The WMS is also reviewing CAPs which required revisions that WMATA submitted last week to address radio communication deficiencies in rail yards and a lack of safety procedures for parts of rail yards that are not signalized. Since the last public meeting, the WMSC has closed CAPs related to findings such as documented maintenance procedures and training, unauthorized use of personal electronic devices, and RWP training. These closures are based on documentation, discussions, or inspections that demonstrated WMATA had completed all specified action items. The WMSC also closed an older CAP related to adequate staffing in the ROCC that has been superseded by work related to the WMSC's ROCC audit issued last September. WMATA continues to work to establish adequate staffing in the ROCC. The WMSC has also approved for implementation 13 CAPs related to the elevated structures audit and 15 CAPs related to the rail maintenance machine RMM audit. The WMSC continues to monitor closed CAPs through the regular inspection process to assess whether mitigations are working as intended. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you. I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Karuna. Rodney, I have a couple of questions. One is let me see if I can find the place where I was looking for it. No, I don't see it. So I'll go to the second one. The second one is actually a question for Ms. Samar Singh related to our elevated structures audit, because given the recent bridge collapse in Mexico City, I believe that was a rail bridge collapse, as well as our pedestrian bridge collapse here in DC, in the DC area, and the building collapse, recent building collapse in Florida. Can you give us an update about where we are and where WMATA is regarding elevated structures?
Yes, Chair Hart. And so if I can take you all back to earlier this year, we did issue a final report on the elevated structure safety audit, which we had conducted previously. In there are a whole host of deficiencies which we noted through findings that correlate to the health of elevated structures concerning staffing, processes, inspection activities, and so forth. However, I think what you're asking about is specifically the availability of load ratings for elevated structures on the Metro Rail system. And so in our audit on elevated structures, the second finding precisely talks about the fact that Metro Rail does not have load ratings for structures. And what we discovered during the audit was that there were no load ratings for these structures, nor were there any practices to assess additional load ratings posed by lengthier trains, heavier trains, as presented by the 7000 series rail cars, nor is there a process to assess ongoing the ability of those structures to continue performing as they age. So all of these things were captured in our elevated structures audit report in finding number 2. And we now have a cap, which we have approved, a Metro Rail cap, which we have approved for Metro Rail to accomplish all of these items that we noted as deficient as part and parcel of maintaining a robust load rating process at Metro Rail for its elevated structures. So the first step in this is this interim action where WMATA is required to submit this fall in relation to Metro Rail's load rating process, their process to ensure that the weight of vehicles is properly considered in when WMATA goes ahead and conducts various kinds of vehicle procurements and the approvals process embedded in that. And then in addition to that, also geared towards ongoing understanding of the load ratings, WMATA is now conducting interim assessments on structures they have identified as being in the worst conditions. They call this a high priority list. So this includes running more detailed calculations on structures, and that interim analysis is scheduled to be completed this winter. And then eventually, over the course of the next 2 years, by 2023, they will have an entire complement of load ratings, a load rating table, as well as processes for all of their elevated structures in the Metro Rail system. So that is the plan ahead, and this entirety of the plan has been approved as a corrective action plan that will take a number of years to complete. So that's where things stand.
Well, thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very helpful, and kudos to both you and WMATA for the work that you're doing to address this issue that, as I say, has been brought to mind by these recent events. Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Samar Singh on that specific point? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Karuna, Rodney, I found the question I was looking for, which is, once we've approved WMATA's performance on a cap, is there a way for us to know if the activity that they use to satisfy the cap is no longer underway and they're not doing it anymore? Do we have any way of sort of following up and knowing if a formally complied with cap is no longer being complied with?
It happens with frequent inspections, Mr. Chairman. If that is what you're asking after you close the cap, is there any way for us to investigate and find out if they're following the procedures? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it happens frequently through the inspections. We follow up to ensure that the closed caps are carried out properly.
Excellent. Thank you. Does any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Karuna-Rotning? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next item, which is audits, with an update from Audit Program Manager, Mr. Davis Rotick. Mr. Rotick?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The fitness for duty audit is nearing completion. The team is finalizing a draft report to transmit to Wabata in coming weeks for technical review. The rail car audit team is also finalizing a draft report, and the traction power audit team completed interviews this month and held the exit conference on June 18. The team is now reviewing follow-up documents that were identified based on the interviews, and the team expects to prepare the draft report this summer. The next audit we are working on is the Fire Life Safety and Emergency Management audit, and interviews and field observations are planned for August. We expect this audit will be completed later this year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rotick. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Rotick? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is resolutions. This one relates to a procurement. Dr. Meyer, the floor is yours.
Sorry about that. I lost my place here. Thank you, Chair Hart. The WMSC uses professional graphic design services to assist with the preparation and layout of our reports and other materials. We plan to competitively award these services in the near future. We estimate that the annual cost of these services will exceed the $50,000 threshold established by our procurement manual, and thus we need the approval of the commissioners to make that award. So we're seeking that approval today.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer? This would be resolution 2021-09, but I'm not sure that anybody knows exactly what it is. Ms. Foltz, do you have a copy of that resolution?
Let me see. I just need to look quickly through my materials for the meeting. The resolution is
it was posted in Board Effect a week ago for review.
Yeah, the resolution is to authorize the WMSC to solicit quotations and to make an award following the competitive procurement in accordance with the WMSC procurement manual. And because the anticipated amount of this contract could potentially exceed the $50,000 threshold that requires board approval, that's why we're going ahead with this resolution today to authorize the competitive procurement and the award following that procurement.
Oh,
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Any questions from any of the commissioners regarding resolution 2021-09?
I was just going to ask, are we going to approve that we are actually doing the procurement, and are you coming back to us to approve it if it goes over the dollar amount?
The approval that's required and what we're seeking now is what's in the procurement manual. The procurement manual says that before I can make an award that exceeds $50,000, I need to have the permission of the commissioners. And so that's what I'm seeking today. Our estimates and market research suggests that our needs will result in a cost that exceeds the $50,000 threshold. Obviously, if our competition and negotiation gets it down below that, that would be great, but we don't expect that.
So I think to Commissioner Farardike's question, I think the question is, would we need to come back and approve the specific procurement, or is this approval today just approving you to do a procurement that's over $50,000?
We're seeking the approval ultimately to make an award in excess of $50,000 today. That's what the manual calls for. So that's what we're seeking. We just tend to seek these out before we start the procurement process so that we don't inadvertently get into a delay or a holding pattern once we've reached agreement with a successful offerer before we can actually make award.
So David, just to clarify, if we pass this resolution, which I assume we will, you don't need to come back to us to make the award.
That's correct.
I guess that's the question. Okay.
That's correct, because that's the permission I'm seeking today, ultimately, to make the award.
So Ms. Fultz, are you satisfied that's what the resolution asks for?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-09?
So
So
moved.
moved. I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded is that I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush,
Approve.
and Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Resolution R 2021-09 for the competitive procurement and award of graphic design services is approved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fultz. That completes the public portion of the business of our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We expect that our next public meeting will be on August 3rd, 2021. At this time, we expect the meeting will again be held remotely via video conference. We look forward to seeing you then. The commissioners have some further issues to address in executive session, and our bylaws permit closing a portion of this meeting to the public for specific purposes as specified in federal law. So today, this is business that relates solely to internal personnel matters. In accordance with 5 U.S.C. 552B(f), I request that the council certify that the meeting may be closed to the public and to state that the applicable exempting provision of the act gives us that authority.
Yes, Chairman Hart. This portion of the meeting may be closed as specified in 5 U.S.C. 552B, paragraph C2, for the board to discuss issues relating solely to internal personnel practices of the agency.
Okay, thank you. So pursuant to 5 U.S.C. 552B(d), a majority of the members are required to vote to enter into executive session. So I would like to move that we go into executive session for the reasons stated by Ms. Fultz, and that we then adjourn following that executive session. We will publicly reconfirm the topic discussed in the executive session at our next public meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
I will now ask, thank you for the second, Commissioner Rush. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz, didn't mean to promote you quite so fast. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Great, thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
And Commissioner Lobby.
Approved.
Thank you. The public meeting is adjourned and we will enter into executive session.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Again, we expect to hold our next public meeting on August 3rd, 2021, and we look forward to seeing you then. Meanwhile, I would like to thank the members of the public who attended this meeting, as well as the WMSC staff for their thorough preparation for the meeting and the commissioners for their extensive engagement. Commissioners, please leave this meeting and join the executive session.